issue in the fray for that. So you want to be able to use your grass type moves to try and remove it from the field, and at the same time being able to have something like Priority Grassy Glide could still deal some good damage to, you know, something like the Shadow Rider Calyrex as well. The other key thing I want to talk about, Oliver, in terms of synergy wise, is that Tornadus and Kyogre.
Yeah.
If you know, it's not necessarily prevalent to this match because there isn't a Sun on the opposing side, but if potentially you've got that Rain Dance variant as well, it does just show how strong a combination they can be, as well as being able to go for incredibly quick speed control. Coming out for Oliver, we have got the Tornadus paired up with the Ashton, and for Ashton, that Shadow Rider Calyrex with the Whimsicott. So there could be some tailwinds here, Lee.
Yeah, both players leading with their speed control options. Obviously, both Prankster users as well, you've got to assume. And you've got to say that Ashton's probably in a little bit of a better position here to get his Tailwind up first and get an attack off with the Calyrex. You know, he's going to be able to get its signature attack off onto both the Ashton and the Tornadus before either of those can move.
I mean, that's the thing as well. If the Calyrex is holding something like the Focus Sash, Oliver really just needs to double up into that slot to remove it from the field. But you have to kind of ask at what cost. If you don't want to go for a Tailwind with your own Tornadus, then, you know, you're going to be definitely slower going into that next turn, and you need to make sure your Tornadus will still be around in order to get that Tailwind up later in the game. But instead, it's going to be a straight switch. Rillaboom joins the fray, gets that grassy terrain onto the field, and can apply something like the Fake Out Pressure to that Whimsicott in the next turn. It's going to be interesting to see where the items do fall, because actually Whimsicott is another Pokemon that is well known for holding that Focus Sash. So I wonder if it's on the Calyrex or on the Whimsicott. But Whimsicott doing what it does best, going for that priority Tailwind as Calyrex goes for the Astral Barrage. So going to target down into both of Oliver's Pokemon here. Rillaboom able to take it really well, maybe indicative of the item that Rillaboom is holding, and the Zacian able to fire back with a Behemoth Blade. Very, very powerful into that opposing Calyrex and takes it down to the Focus Sash. We've had that reveal straight away. Yeah,
it's a really nice adjustment here from Oliver to kind of get the Calyrex, put the Calyrex in a position where now he's going to be able to just Grassy Glide into that slot and really remove it from playing and kind of stop any effective use of that Pokemon. And you saw how well Oliver's Zacian and the Rillaboom both took that Astral Barrage there, not really taking too much damage, a lot less damage than you maybe would expect from the Calyrex sometimes, but the Tailwind there from the Whimsicott on Ashton's side of the field. So yeah, he's got a speed advantage. You've got to keep that in mind if you are Oliver, but I like the way that he's kind of brought in the Rillaboom to put that instant pressure back onto Ashton's side of the field, knowing that there is a chance that if that Whimsicott on Ashton's side of the field maybe has Taunt, then if I go for Tailwind, it's a bit risky. Let's keep it for later on, and I like that approach from Oliver. But Ashton's still in a good position with the Tailwind up. He's just got to try and protect this Calyrex this turn. Maybe we do see it switch out into something like potentially an Incineroar here.
Yeah, the Incineroar would make sense just because the Grassy Glide has that priority, but no switches from Ashton's side, so Grassy Glide will be able to KO the Calyrex as Whimsicott does go for the Moonblast, so we'll find it's marked down onto that opposing Rillaboom. Does a minimal amount of damage, and to be honest, that grassy terrain is going to be able to recover a good chunk of that as well. So it does give Ashton the opportunity now to bring in a Pokemon from the back to apply some pressure, particularly while that Tailwind is up as well. You want to capitalize on it as best as you can, and something that the Thundurus isn't going to worry so much about the Grassy Glides, nor is Whimsicott, to be quite frank.
Now, the Thundurus is a great Pokemon here to bring in for Ashton in particular, because if it is the Defiant variant as well, it has the ability to go for that Dynamax right now, and it can threaten both Rillaboom with a Max Airstream, just increase that speed control a little bit more and kind of solidify that a bit more with the Tailwind on top of that. Or it can go for the Max Lightning, change the terrain, and really threaten a knockout onto the Tornadus that has the ability to Tailwind here, but it's not really going to get very much value from that at this point in time.
Well, Zacian coming in here, revealing we've got all four of Ashton's Pokemon now knowledgeable to us all here, and that Intrepid Sword is going to be able to boost up its attack to that +1. So it really is down to this Thundurus, I would say, to be Ashton's key to removing that Kyogre if it is, of course, hiding out in the back. Looks like we're going to see the Dynamax come out here, so that Thundurus is going to be able to Dynamax up and apply some good pressure. Going for something like those Max Lightnings is going to be dealing, obviously, a huge chunk to something like the Tornadus, and then we'll be able to threaten the Kyogre if it comes in from the back. And even if it is going to go into a Zacian, particularly once it's come in, it's going to be able to deal some good damage. And I like this play here from Oliver, being able to go for the Tailwind, particularly as the Whimsicott's Tailwind will be running out. The Grassy Glide does go into the Thundurus, as you can see, not very effective, particularly when it is Dynamax. And I love this from Ashton with the speed control. Going for the Max Airstream not only picks up the KO against that Rillaboom, but is able to get the boost of the speed up for both the Zacian and the and of the Thunderous as well.
And the Thunderous as well, Lee.
Thunderous Tornado, so I want to make sure I'm talking about the right one, Lee.
Too many of the genies on the field. But yes, like you say, a really nice play from Ashton here, getting rid of the Rillaboom there, and just setting that speed control motion. Now if he gets another max airstream this next turn, then he's kind of matching Tailwind without necessarily needing to set his Tailwind with his Whimsicott that he's quite smartly kept in the back for the late game, you know. Oliver still has access to Dynamax something, but in this position you don't really want to be Dynamaxing the Tornadus here, and obviously the Zacian doesn't have the ability to, but with the Tailwind up, it is kind of putting him in a position where he's trying to keep up with the speed that we've got on Ashton's side of the field.
As well, from Oliver's side, you might even not necessarily need the Dynamax if you're able to. Obviously, the only Dynamax options here for Oliver are going to be the Tornadus and the Pokemon in the back. Let's assume it's going to be that Kyogre. If you can get your Kyogre in Tailwind with not any other threats on the other side, you can just go for that Water Spout, which is going to be devastating in the rain and be able to hit both your opposing Pokemon. Whereas if you go for the Dynamax option, then you can only really hit one. And I think you want to capitalize on having that speed advantage with Water Spout. So Tornadus going to go for the Protect here. So again, no Dynamax, just protecting itself from anything that Ashton might want to throw over in that direction. In fact, Oliver playing it very defensively, just to double protect, stalling out one of these max turns. Zacian going for the Behemoth Blade into the opposing Zacian, of course, into the protect, so no damage will be dealt. And Thunderous going for the max airstream. It does go through, obviously, the protect into that Tornadus, and I think this is the critical thing here for Ashton. Yes, it gets a critical hit, but you're getting up those speed boosts on your side as well, and that's going to make things a little bit more difficult for Oliver as this end game sort of pans out, because Ashton does still have that Whimsicott in the back as well. Tailwind could happen later on.
Yeah, and there's not really the need for the Tailwind anymore, because he's got that +2 with the airstreams now, so the Thunderous is +2, the Zacian's +2, so even if you say get your Tailwind up with the Tornadus now, it's not really putting you in a position where it's giving you an advantage like it would have previously. So the Thunderous now in a great position to go for another airstream, pick up the knockout potentially onto the Tornadus this turn, and just get some really good damage from your own Zacian into the opposing Zacian. Oliver in a bit of a tricky spot right now.
Yeah, just the Zacian on Oliver's side gets a critical hit down across onto the opposing Zacian there. Oh, sorry, that was the Zacian on Ashton's side. So many Zacians. As the max airstream does come out, like you said there, Lee, able to get that KO. So big damage coming out here from Ashton's side of the field, picking up a double KO. So destructive towards the end of this game one.
Yeah, and now Oliver down to his last 2 Pokemon. He does have his Tornadus, and like you say, Lou, it probably is the Kyogre in the back. And
yeah,
the Thunderous' max turns have finished now, but it's going to be in a position where it's still going to be outspeeding no matter what Oliver can do with in respect to a Tailwind. And the only real option really would be maybe try and protect your Kyogre here. It's risky and max your Tornadus and go for an airstream.
It's just Kyogre.
It's gone.
Kyogre's
it's all
Kyogre. Alone. There's no one else.
Denial.
No, poor Kyogre all on its own. And yes, it's in the situation it wants to be, where it's got the rain up, but the speed is just not there. And you know, you spoke about it yourself, Lee, about the speed being so critical. And it doesn't matter if Tornadus have been able to get Tailwinds up, because Ashton had been able to negate them with those max airstreams. And I think that was an excellent play for him to have that foresight to go, you know, you're going to have your advantage here. If you have your Kyogre in and it's speedier, you can go for those Water Spouts. There's nothing I can do to stop you, so I need to stop you having that speed advantage, and that's exactly what Ashton did.
Yeah, he managed the game extremely well. I was so caught up on the critical hit from the Behemoth Blade on the Zacian, I missed the Tornadus.
It's one of these action-packed games. There's so much going on, left, right and centre.
Ashton managed that extremely well, you know. He identified that Oliver is very reliant on the Tailwind in particular, and even though he kind of set his own Tailwind, he put himself in a position with his own Dynamax where the Tailwind was pretty much negated in the late game, and he got himself into a position where it was near impossible for Oliver to get the comeback. The critical hit was a little bit unfortunate, but I don't think it probably would have really changed the overall outcome of that first game. But balls in Oliver's court, he's got to really adjust and kind of come up with a different game plan into this next one, because Ashton's certainly got it kind of down, and it looks like he knows exactly what he needs to do to get the advantage of Oliver in this game.
And Ashton has a lot of fluidity through his team. You know, we were talking a lot about with the Thunderous maybe going for things like the Max Lightning to apply pressure to Tornadus or Kyogre, but actually those Max Airstreams are pretty devastating by themselves with the addition of getting that boost. You know, if you're Thunderous, you don't really need to set Electric Terrain either. You're not going to benefit from it because you're, you know, up in the air, not touching the terrain. But I think that still gives Ashton the flexibility. If potentially you are in a situation where you're against that Kyogre, you can utilize a max lightning and do so much damage to it and just remove it from the field. At the same time, Ashton has a lot of good balance here between physical and special attacking kind of Pokemon. You've got the really heavy hitters of something like the Zacian, but then you've also got that Shadow Rider Calyrex, and we saw how much the Astral Barrage was doing, even to Pokemon that, you know, switching in that Rillaboom, being able to take it reasonably well. It's still a threat you have to deal with, because if you allow Ashton to get that KO and you start getting the Grimnade boosts as well, then particularly with speed going up on that side of the field, if you maybe already have the Tailwind with the Whimsicott, but then Dynamax up that Thundurus and go for a Max Airstream, these Grimnade boosts are going to keep rolling and rolling and rolling. Yeah, and
that's what the one thing you want to really try and avoid if you are Oliver. I think it's really difficult for Oliver, because I think that the big problem Pokemon on Ashton's side of the field for him is that Thundurus, and it's really difficult to bring things like the Incineroar, like the Landorus to this match, because you're just giving Ashton even more of an advantage if you're proccing that Defiant ability, and it's one thing you want to do. So it does really lock out maybe those two Pokemon, especially as a lead, and you kind of want, you know, to be able to maybe bring those Pokemon to slow things like the opposing Zacian down.
Yeah.
And definitely the Landorus has, you would think, more than likely an attack to hit that Thundurus to super effective damage with rock type attack. So it is something that you want on the field in front of it. It's just not something you want to bring out in front of it, you know.
That's the thing, the threat is real, right? And it's that mind game in turn 0. What do you bring? And you want to maybe keep your Intimidate users on the bench if you have that potential Thundurus Defiant lead. The leads for this game too, however, we've got Rillaboom and Kyogre out there for Oliver, whereas Whimsicott and Calyrex once again for Ashton. Really interesting combinations here. Rillaboom obviously being able to apply pressure with something like the Fake Out, and Kyogre could threaten that potential Water Spout, or could be a Dynamax Pokemon of choice.
Yeah, and it looks like it might be the Dynamax choice for Oliver here, as he is going to be Dynamaxing their Kyogre in that dive ball. I wasn't too sure. Could have been Rillaboom in a dive ball.
Oh, well, yeah, you could. It's a bit of a giveaway, isn't it? The blue coordination, got to be stylish out here at the European International Championships. And I think Kyogre, having a bit of a rough time at the end of that game 1, wants to come out in full force. Whimsicott, however, going for the helping hand into that Shadow Rider Calyrex as it goes for the Astral Barrage. So no priority coming out here from that opposing Rillaboom. Does a huge chunk of damage with the Astral Barrage, and I really, really like this play from the Kyogre, going for the Max Hailstorm down into that opposing Whimsicott, removes it from play. We know the Focus Sash is onto the Calyrex, but then having this chip just starts to kind of whittle away at the Pokemon.
Yeah, it's a nice way to guarantee that you get the Whimsicott there and remove that additional kind of source of speed control. And also, when you combine it with the knockoff that we've just seen from the Rillaboom onto the Calyrex with that additional chip there from the Hailstorm, you are clearing a path and having a very big lead coming into this first turn of Game 2.
I mean, honestly, I thought knockoff Rillaboom was a thing of the past, and it is brilliant to see it back in the fray. When Rillaboom first came out, every single time it had knockoff, because you could just remove all of those items from play. But the other thing I love about the Hail is not only does it KO the Whimsicott, you know, allow the Calyrex to be KO'd due to the Focus Sash, but it covered a potential Gastrodon switch in from the back as well, because if you went for that Max Geyser and then Gastrodon pops up and says hello, then you're just wasting your Max move and giving Gastrodon the benefit there. Of course, in the face of Rillaboom, it is unlikely, but it just covers all options, and I really like that thinking there from Oliver, particularly being able to get the double KO so ferociously in this game too. And now Ashton has Thundurus and Zacian out here on the field, and the issue is the only Dynamax Pokemon Ashton can use now is that Thundurus.
Yeah, and we are going to see that this turn, and you got to presume a double up into the Kyogre here. Depending on how it's trained, could be enough to get it, but does Oliver kind of try and stall around this in some sort of way and try and get damage onto the Thundurus, somehow protect the Kyogre this turn? Might be a play, but you've still got 4 Pokemon if you are Oliver, so you don't need to overcompensate when it's massively necessary to.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just kind of stall out the turns here for Ashton. And you can see the substitute coming up for the Zacian, so playing a little bit defensively here as the Thundurus goes for the Max Airstream. So not into the Max Guard of the Kyogre, instead targeting down that Rillaboom to get the nice KO against it. And also Ashton is starting that speed control rolling again that we saw him do so well in that game 1. Boosting up the speed of both the Zacian, hiding sneakily behind the little substitute, certainly where it wants to be at the end of this turn when it is at a kind of Pokemon deficit to Oliver. And now, you know, being able to bring in from the back Oliver a Pokemon, that can possibly help Oliver change up the board positioning here. But Ashton definitely trying to make a commanding comeback here, getting up that speed, having Zacian protected, and Thundurus obviously can now really apply pressure to that opposing Kyogre.
Yeah, great play from Ashton, you know, taking advantage of the pressure that was applied there to the Kyogre, you know, and identifying, okay, well, it makes sense that it would max guard, so let's take advantage of this. Let's get my Zacian in a really nice secure spot, and let's start getting the speed control onto the field with the Thundurus and get rid of things like the Rillaboom first off and foremost, because being able to do that, put your Zacian ahead of the opposing Zacian and on the other side of the field gives you such an advantage going into this next turn. And now the Kyogre is still in that position depending on what Oliver brings in now, where it is going to be threatened from the double up from the Zacian, but the layer of protection that you've got with the substitute now on the Zacian is just like, it puts Ashton in such a comfortable position and almost swinging the momentum a bit more into Ashton's favor rather than where it was after that first turn in Oliver's.
Yeah, that's completely true. And we see the Zacian coming in here for Oliver, being able to get the boost up due to Intrepid Sword, and as well from Ashton, knowing that those Intimidate Pokemon are most likely sitting on the bench, it allows that freedom as well with the Zacian not having its attack stat drop down to neutral as well. Once again, you know, if you're Oliver, you have to worry about the speed advantage that Ashton has now got. Ashton can easily go for anything with that Thundurus, something like the Max Lightning down into the opposing Kyogre. Kyogre has just max guarded. It's very unlikely going to be able to get a protect on the next turn. So either it's going to be switching in something from the back like that Tornadus, which again isn't going to want to take anything like a Max Lightning, allowing the Zacian on Ashton's side to capitalize on maybe targeting down the opposing Zacian with a Behemoth Blade.
Yes, we're going to see a big Behemoth Blade come out from the Zacian on Ashton's side of the field into Oliver's Zacian. This time is able to hang on just about, but protected behind that sub. There's a Max Lightning coming out. Will it be enough, Lou, to get the Kyogre? And it is.
Ooh, yeah, big damage going down into that water-type Dynamax Pokemon. The Electric Train's going to surge all around the field, of course, but really not too much avail. We don't have to worry about any sleep here, but we do have to see this Kyogre go back into its Pokeball. Such destruction from the Max Lightning, and, you know, again, Ashton using one turn of speed to become very dominant out in this match. The opposing Zacian Hub is going to go for the Behemoth Blade. Now, wondering who this is going to target down to. It could break the substitute, but if it goes in to that Thundurus, it's obviously going to have double base power, picks up the KO.
Yeah, that's interesting for Oliver. It's a nice way removing. It's not great that you're losing your Kyogre, but in return you are picking up the knockout onto the Thundurus. Now, if you've got something like Landorus in the back now,
oh, what a reveal!
Oliver, that would be the one Pokemon that you kind of want to come in, not the Tornadus, but the Landorus or the Incineroar. If you've got that in the back, knowing that that's the key, get rid of the Thundurus, and then you could bring those in. But you know, it is very risky at the same time.
Yeah, it certainly is. So we do see the Tornadus still here, targeting down against the Zacian. Now, normally you would think 2v1 is normally quite favourable odds, but with Zacian behind the substitute, it's going to take that extra hit to be able to just leave it exposed to be able to be KO'd to any damage. And we know the Tornadus isn't necessarily the most offensive Pokemon out there. We have seen it go for things like the Tailwind here in this situation, so it does have that more supportive role for Oliver's team. But if something like a Hurricane's able to come down on it, possibly even maybe even get some of these confusions running, that could certainly be an interesting end to this game too.
Yeah, and I think you've got to go for the Tailwind if you are Oliver. It's a difficult turn here because you kind of want to attack with your own Zacian and then break the substitute. But it's risky because if you lose it, then you lose your kind of the main way to put offensive pressure on. We are just seeing both Zacians protect here, and I wonder if we will see a Tailwind come out from... Ooh, that is a huge reveal here for the Tornadus on Oliver's side of the field, revealing that Heat Wave, which is one of the best super effective attacks that it can carry against opposing Zacians.
I mean, that's what you need right now if you're that Tornadus. If you're Oliver, you need to find a way to break through that substitute, and it could potentially be a case of going for the Tailwind and going for the Behemoth Blade just to break the substitute, allowing Tornadus on the next turn to try and pick up the KO against it with the Heat Wave, or in turn the Zacian with the Behemoth Blade, because when you take a look at the damage that the Zacian on Ashton's side has got, it's taken about a third of damage. Maybe one more turn of Hail Chip as well could be enough to finish it off. Tornadus is indeed going to go for that Tailwind, boosting up the speed so that Oliver's Zacian can move first with that Behemoth Blade. It really is what Oliver needs in order to push this to a Game 3, connecting down onto the opposing Zacian. Substitute will be broken and then left a little bit more exposed going into this next turn. But I wonder who Ashton has targeted here. Is the priority removing the Zacian, or is it trying to remove this Tornadus knowing that it has that Heat Wave?
Yeah, I think it is the Zacian every time, because the Heat Wave, if you are relying on it, it's not as accurate as
It can
the
miss.
Behemoth Blade. So you are relying more on the odds at this point and hoping that it does miss. But depending on how the Zacian's been trained on Ashton's end, and you can see by the HP number here that it probably is a little bit more bulky than your standard kind of just run-of-the-mill Zacian, might be able to take the Heat Wave. The Hail Chip has not been the kindest of things. You don't really want that additional damage, but you've still given yourself a good chance, and a Behemoth Blade should be enough to take the Tornadus.
Yeah, and of course the hail has stopped now as well, so it really comes down to Tornadus and whether this Heat Wave is going to connect. It does, but then how much damage can it deal? Is it enough? It is not enough. Zacian surviving on 26 hit points and is able to retaliate with the Behemoth Blade. Now, if I remember correctly, the Tornadus was looking pretty healthy, but still, this is such a devastating attack. It's going to be enough to pick up the KO, meaning Ashton will be able to win the set here in round 7. Huge congratulations. It really got intense towards the end of that game too.
Yeah, an amazing set from both players. You know, Oliver did everything right to put himself in that perfect position, just didn't